Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. U.S. forces board a ship in the Indian Ocean after it defies a quarantine from the Trump administration. We have the details there. And the search for Nancy Guthrie entering the second week. Possible abductors demanding $6 million before this evening. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings releasing another video pleading with any possible kidnappers. This week on Capitol Hill, Republicans are set to vote on the SAVE Act, a measure to create voter ID requirements and eliminate non-citizen voting. The House pressuring the Senate and President Trump weighing in. Global reactions are pouring in after Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai is sentenced to 20 years in prison.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today is Monday, February 9th. I'm Stephanie Cox. The search for Nancy Guthrie is in its 9th day. So far, no suspects have been named. Guthrie's possible abductor or abductors are demanding $6 million by today's deadline of 5 p.m. That's according to a CNN affiliate, citing a ransom note the station says they received. Here's what we've learned so far.
Nancy Guthrie was last seen by her family on January 31st when she joined relatives for dinner and game night near her home outside Tucson, Arizona. The search for the 84-year-old is now in its 9th day. Former SWAT team captain Josh Sherrard says he doesn't believe there's been direct communication between the Guthrie family and any alleged abductors.
We still have no valid two-way communication with this possible hostage taker and the author of these ransom notes. It's been all one way. And I think that both sides are probably getting a little desperate as to start that communication before that deadline comes up.
The deadline in one of the initial purported ransom notes was for Monday at 5 p.m., demanding millions in Bitcoin. In a video released Saturday, Savannah Guthrie and her siblings issued a clear message.
We beg you now to return our mother to us so that we can celebrate with her. This is the only way we will have peace. This is very valuable to us, and we will pay.
Retired FBI supervisory agent Lance Lessing says investigators are closely working with the Guthrie family.
They're following a pretty solid playbook, trying to humanize the victim initially in that first, trying to open lines of communication, trying to get proof of life. This second statement, very different, but still a playbook, still offering to pay, offering to get that open line of communication. How do we pay?
Lawmakers attempting to question Jeffrey Epstein's former associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, today amid an investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. House Oversight Chair James Comer saying Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment rights during a 20-minute video call.
As expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the Fifth and refused to answer any questions. This is obviously very disappointing. We had many questions to ask about the crimes she and Epstein committed, as well as questions about potential co-conspirators. We sincerely want to get to the truth of the American people and justice for the survivors. That's what this investigation is about. Just to be clear, what her attorney said, Maxwell didn't say, her attorney said that she would answer questions if she were granted clemency by the President Trump.
Maxwell currently serving a 20-year sentence for sex trafficking. Comer issuing several subpoenas following the release of files showing Epstein's connections to a range of influential figures. Former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and Epstein's former neighbor and Victoria's Secret CEO Les Wexner among those ordered to testify. The Clintons are scheduled to be deposed on February 26th and 27th. Epstein's accountant Richard Kahn and Epstein's lawyer Darren Indyke also scheduled to testify next month. And we wish that investigation great success. Turning next to the Super Bowl, the competition not limited to the field. Two competing halftime events going head-to-head, the NFL's traditional show and a conservative-backed alternative. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the highlights.
And this one's for you, Charlie.
With those words, conservative commentator Jack Posobiec paid tribute to the late Turning Point USA co-founder while debuting the organization's All-American halftime show. That was just moments before Bad Bunny took the stage at Levi's Stadium at the Super Bowl in Santa Clara, California. The Dueling halftime performances date back to last year, when the NFL named Bad Bunny to headline the halftime show in September. The rock band Green Day was added to lead the opening ceremony. Both acts have openly criticized President Trump. The NFL's decision motivated Turning Point USA to create the All-American halftime show as an alternative. It described its show as providing entertainment for viewers that celebrate American culture, freedom, and faith. Kid Rock was the most notable name in Turning Point USA's event. Here he is on Fox News discussing the show.
They realize there's a big portion of this country, like it or not, that's underserved entertainment-wise. And, we're just going to go play for our base, people who love America, love football, love Jesus.
Rock added a verse to Cody Johnson's Till You Can't in an emotional tribute to Charlie Kirk. The Turning Point show also showcased performances by country singers Lee Brice, Brantley Gilbert, and Gabby Barrett. The NFL has stood by having Bad Bunny host the halftime show amid pushback from conservatives. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell called him one of the great artists in the world before the Super Bowl. Before the dueling shows, social media lit up with chatter from supporters of both artists. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said he was excited to watch Kid Rock in the All-American Super Bowl halftime show. Former President Barack Obama's Obama Foundation posted, "From one natural-born U.S. citizen to another, have a great Benito Bowl." War Secretary Pete Hegseth greeted the audience with a video clip.
From the War Department, we salute Turning Point USA and every American who still believes freedom is worth defending. Thank you for your courage as an organization, your clarity, and your leadership, and for this halftime show that the War Department is proud to support.
Turning Point USA on Saturday posted on X a video featuring Kirk discussing the Super Bowl.
When you have the most televised event, this is true, most televised event for the entire year, one of the most televised events on the planet, by the way, that should be a reflection of the virtue that hopefully you want society to embody.
Bad Bunny is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio. He has been an outspoken critic of federal immigration law enforcement efforts by the Trump administration. He was born and raised in Puerto Rico. He often wears a dress when performing and primarily sings in Spanish. He was Spotify's most streamed artist globally in 2025. In September 2025, he said that he would not perform in the United States because of ICE operations. Bad Bunny's halftime show included performances from special guests Alex Earl and Cardi B, and Ricky Martin, among other stars who appeared on stage. Lady Gaga made a cameo and danced with the headline artist before her performance of Die With a Smile. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt last week chimed in on which show, Bad Bunny or Kid Rock, President Trump would prefer.
I think the president would much prefer a Kid Rock performance over Bad Bunny, I must say that.
Trump called Bad Bunny's halftime show absolutely terrible. The president said the dancing was disgusting, especially for young children. Nearly 6 million people watched the Turning Point All-American halftime show. The Super Bowl usually has over 100 million viewers. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And thanks to Daniel for that report. U.S. forces boarded a vessel overnight in the Indian Ocean, demonstrating American maritime power. In a post on X, the War Department confirming that the military boarded the vessel without incident. Video showing troops descending from a helicopter to take control of the ship. The department saying the vessel had been tracked from the Caribbean to the Indian Ocean after defying President Trump's quarantine on sanctioned ships. The post saying when the Department of War says quarantine, they mean it. Officials stressing that illicit actors will not be allowed to evade American power on the seas. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expected to meet President Trump in Washington Wednesday. The two are expected to discuss negotiations with Iran following indirect talks between U.S. and Iranian officials Friday. Netanyahu's office said in a statement that any negotiations must include limitations on ballistic missiles and halting the support of the Iranian axis. The meeting on Wednesday will be the 7th between the two leaders since Trump took office. Now to Hong Kong, where Jimmy Lai, an important pro-democracy voice and outspoken critic of the Chinese Communist Party, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. Hong Kongers and the world reacting strongly to the sentence. Here's that story.
A court in Hong Kong has sentenced media founder and critic of China's Communist Party Jimmy Lai to 20 years in prison. A panel of judges sentenced Lai under the city's national security law, a law imposed by the Chinese regime in 2020. Lai, who started the pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily, was convicted in December last year of colluding with foreign forces and publishing so-called seditious material. Before his sentencing Monday, he had already spent years in custody. Supporters had been lining up outside the courthouse for days, hoping to see him in person.
I think the Hong Kong situation now is like today's weather, gray and covered with dark clouds. Apple Daily was the only platform which carried the voice of the Hong Kongers.
Today's sentence brought no relief. The judges spared Lai the maximum penalty of life in prison. But for the 78-year-old, 20 years could still mean he remains in prison for the rest of his life. Lai's family says his health has worsened during years of detention. His son called the punishment devastating for the family and life-threatening for his father. The ruling prompted immediate criticism from press freedom advocates. Jody Ginsburg, CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists, said in a statement, "The rule of law has been completely shattered in Hong Kong." The Asia director of Human Rights Watch, Elaine Pearson, said Lai's sentence is effectively a death sentence. She added Lai's years of persecution shows the Chinese government's determination to crush independent journalism and silence anyone who dares to criticize the Communist Party. Edward Lee, a former chief breaking news editor for Apple Daily, said Lai's prison sentence was shocking.
The words I've heard the most today are, "There's nothing more to say." Everyone has reached a point where they're completely lost for words. When you see this verdict, you really don't know what else you can say.
Senator Rick Scott said in a statement, Jimmy Lai was unjustly sentenced by Communist China to 20 years in prison for the crime of daring to think differently from the CCP and refusing to use his newspaper to spread CCP propaganda. Taiwan's government condemned the harsh sentence and called for Lai's release. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council said Lai's sentence under Hong Kong's national security law not only deprives him of his personal liberty and tramples on freedom of speech and press freedom, but also denies the people's basic right to hold those in power accountable.
The U.S. State Department responding to Jimmy Lai's verdict today. It's calling the Hong Kong court sentencing an unjust and tragic conclusion to this case, adding that, quote, "It shows the world that Beijing will go to extraordinary lengths to silence those who advocate fundamental freedoms in Hong Kong, casting aside the international commitments Beijing made in the 1984 Sino-British Joint Declaration." The department says the U.S. urges authorities to grant Lai humanitarian parole. More on the Jimmy Lai verdict. Reactions coming in from around the world. Britain announcing it's expanding its visa route for Hong Kongers, allowing children of British national status holders to move independently. The British Foreign Minister calling for Lai to be released on humanitarian grounds, citing ongoing deterioration of rights and freedoms in Hong Kong. Japan expressing serious concern over the impact of freedom of speech. Tokyo warning that trust in the one country, two systems framework continues to be undermined. The European Union demanding Lai's immediate release, calling the prosecution politically motivated. Australia criticizing the sentence and urging Beijing to stop suppressing free expression and reconsider the national security law there. Coming up, who's considering a run for president in 2028? As key figures make moves and the murmurings of election season stir, we speak with a political consultant. Meanwhile, this week on Capitol Hill, Republicans set to vote on the SAVE Act, a measure to create voter ID requirements and eliminate non-citizen voting. The House pressuring the Senate, and President Trump weighing in. Welcome back, and turning now to U.S. politics. Speculation about which Democratic nominees may be considering a 2028 presidential run is building after former Vice President Kamala Harris rebooted her last campaign social media page. Recent polling also shows Harris among those leading Democrats, and now Vice President J.D. Vance is leading Republicans. Who else is positioning themselves for the run, and what are the chances? Joining us to discuss is Keith Naughton, a Republican political consultant and the co-founder of Silent Majority Strategies. Good to have you with us today, Keith. How does Kamala Harris stand now for a Democratic primary?
Well, right now she's the front runner. She's been the front runner for the last year or so. She's got the highest name recognition. Tens of millions of Democrats have voted for her twice now. So, she's a very strong candidate from that standpoint. I don't think she's that good as a quality candidate. I mean, she kind of steps on her own words sometimes. She doesn't seem to have very good political sense at times. I mean, she's just not a natural in front of the camera. She's kind of awkward. I think she's got a weak team around her, but she checks all the identity boxes for the Democrats, and she is well known. So she's going to be a strong contender regardless of her flaws.
Meanwhile, we see California Governor Gavin Newsom there was speculation since the very beginning about whether he's interested in running again for president. What are his strengths and weaknesses positioning him right now for the party's nomination?
Well, I think he's very good with the media. I mean, he's very experienced, very smooth. He does have a lot of charisma. There isn't a camera that he won't turn to, that he won't, there isn't anything he won't do to get in front of that camera, to get in front of people's faces. He's got a very experienced team around him. His problem is his substance. I mean, California's been a mess under his governorship. They've been having net out-migration for every single year. That's never happened before. California's gained congressional seats ever since 1850 until he showed up. Now they're losing seats. They've got major deficits, problems with development. He's got a lot of policy challenges. So the question is whether the Democratic electorate are going to just go for the charisma and the flash. There's another problem that he has is he's an old white man, and that doesn't really work in Democratic politics. It's kind of surprising that the elites, or I guess maybe it's not surprising, the Democratic elites are forming around him, but I think they might be missing something in the wider electorate. He does well with older people. He does well with white voters. Harris does much better with minority voters, much better with younger voters. So there's sort of this generational divide between the two of them. But right now it's a two-person race between the two of them.
And just last week, President Trump again named Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio as very likely successors for the Republican Party. How do they currently match up?
Well, Vance is by far the best contender. He's by far in lead of any polling. The question is what happens with the rest of the Trump administration? How do things shake out over the next 2 years? It's going to be very hard to dislodge Vance unless there are significant problems or he makes a significant misstep. I think Rubio is kind of waiting in the wings. He's having a pretty good administration. From a foreign policy standpoint, I think the Trump administration has been mostly successful on that side, much more successful than it has been domestically and domestic policy, at least as far as public polling goes. So that helps with Rubio. But Vance is by far the leader. It's just a matter of whether he can kind of keep it together and if the administration has a good couple of years.
And what kind of lessons would you offer each candidate going forward, say from the last election, but also individually for their own positioning to help deliver victory come Election Day?
Well, for Harris, I'd say fire everyone who works for you because they're pretty terrible. She needs a better team around her, and she has to make a definitive break with Joe Biden. She's got to figure out a way that she can say, look, they kept me in the dark. I had nothing to do with all their terrible decisions. You know, I was just trying to be loyal, but you know what? He was terrible. It's time to turn the page. She has got to kick him to the curb. I think Newsom has to present himself. He's got to do better on the policy front. He's got to appeal better to a broader swath of people, and he's got to come up for a reason why California politics won't take over national politics. For Vance, I think he's got to be more public. He's been kind of quiet. I think he needs to be more forward, defending the president and getting out in front of a few specific issues, taking ownership of some of those stronger issues. I think it's a mistake for him to be quiet because he's also one of the best communicators in the administration. Him and Bessent and Rubio are excellent communicators. He needs to be out there supporting the president more. I think that would help him a lot more, and I think it would help the president.
And what do you think about Rubio's positioning? He's very public at this point.
He is, and I think he is by necessity because there's so much foreign policy focus with this administration and security policy. I think he should keep doing what he's doing. As long as we're notching up successes, that's good. I think something that's going to help Rubio a lot is if Trump and Rubio can knock out this repressive Cuban regime supported by Russia and the CCP. If he can knock those folks out of power, then that is a huge victory, and I think that's going to be a big one in his column.
So 2028.
And it's good for the Cuban people, I should add.
Indeed. So the 2028 elections, of course, are, quite far off in most people's awareness right now. 2026, we've still got the midterms just around the corner. How does all of this kind of constellation positioning beginning potentially impact what goes on come November, and how does that impact 2028?
Well, I think the midterms are always very difficult for a first-term president. So I think it's going to come down a lot to the economy. I think if inflation continues to cool down, and I think if the president can be more disciplined in his policy actions and his messaging, I think there can be some recovery there. I think the question becomes, can Harris or Newsom insert themselves in the Democratic off-year elections in a way that pushes their own message and they're able to take credit for it? Alternately, I think Vance needs to get out there and try to find some Republicans, and he can help push over the finishing line. So the midterms will matter. It will matter depending on who can take credit for what wins and who gets blamed for what losses.
And we'll be watching it closely. Thank you so much, Keith Naughton. Great to hear your insights.
Thank you.
Next, lawmakers return to Washington with just days to find a funding solution on the Department of Homeland Security or see the agency shut down. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says Democrats are standing firm on their demands for reforms to federal immigration enforcement, saying if those demands aren't met, a DHS shutdown would be the fault of Republicans. The Democrats' list of requirements includes requiring immigration enforcement agents to wear body cameras and removing face masks. With the Friday deadline approaching, certain Republican lawmakers are indicating openness to some of those demands, but other demands are seeing more pushback from Republicans. Missing Friday's deadline would not cause a full government shutdown, as the deadline is for an agreement to provide funding just for DHS, but we'll be keeping you updated there too. Next, Republicans on Capitol Hill are pushing to eliminate non-citizen voting. House lawmakers teeing up a vote this week in a bid to pressure the Senate to act. NTD's Melina Weiskup reports.
You wouldn't have it, would probably seem bizarre.
It's an effort to root out non-citizen voting, which critics argue is an issue that should be left to the states.
Every state should be allowed to decide the best way to proceed to ensure that there's a free and fair election. Here in New York, there are, in fact, voter identification requirements. The question is that
the SAVE Act would set federal standards for voting requirements, which in some cases could help states enforce laws they already have on the books.
When people talk about wanting to respect states and their sovereignty, I say I'm 100% for that. The SAVE Act will stop the federal government from interfering with our ability to require that everybody on the voter rolls be a citizen of the United States.
While voter ID is a popular idea among voters from all parties, Democrats in Congress have repeatedly blocked the measure from advancing. This week, House lawmakers are ramping up the pressure on their Senate colleagues.
The problem is Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have been blocking it. So now we're calling on Leader Thune to change this and to force what we call a talking filibuster so that we can force a vote on the Senate floor.
A talking filibuster would require steep commitments from both sides of the aisle. The goal is to open up an unlimited floor debate until one side gives, allowing for a simple majority vote and sidestepping the need for Democrat support. President Trump on Friday weighing in.
I'd love to use the filibuster. The SAVE Act is very important. Voter ID, I mean, if you look at it, no mail-in voting, and you have to have proof of citizenship. Everybody wants it.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune has not committed to taking the time-consuming approach. Instead, he's aiming to attach the SAVE Act to the must-pass bill to fund the DHS.
We will get a vote on the SAVE Act at some point, and I'm not sure exactly what that context will be. It might be, maybe it's in the context of voting on the DHS bill if something's agreed upon.
Lawmakers face an end-of-the-week deadline to fund the DHS and prevent another partial government shutdown. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
The Trump administration is warning of big potential social services fraud in Maine. The administration's top healthcare official suggesting it could be as big as Minnesota's recent welfare scandal. Medicare and Medicaid Administrator Dr. Oz saying on businessman John Castamadis' radio show that this is another big crisis that looks a lot like Minnesota. It comes after Maine Republicans sounded the alarm. Late last year, a whistleblower alleged millions of dollars had gone missing from the state's Medicaid program. And just like in Minnesota, Dr. Oz alleges this fraud is also connected to the state's Somali population. Investigators estimate over $1 billion has been redirected from social services programs in Minnesota. According to Dr. Oz, Minnesota and Maine are just two among many cases of Medicare and Medicaid fraud. He has repeatedly named California as one of the worst offenders, prompting pushback from Governor Gavin Newsom. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's top Medicare official, Dr. Oz, is urging Americans to get vaccinated as measles cases rise across the country, especially in South Carolina. Oz said yesterday, measles is a disease where vaccination is particularly important. Federal data showing hundreds of cases already reported this year, most involving people who did not receive a measles vaccine. CDC figures showing South Carolina accounts for the majority of those infections. Oz also stressing that access to the MMR vaccine is widely covered under federal health programs. At the same time, the Department of Health and Human Services telling the Epoch Times that vaccination decisions should be discussed between families and their doctors. And a quick look at the weather. Conditions over much of the east are still freezing, but relief is on the way at last. Forecasters say winds will slowly subside during the week and temperatures will gradually start to rise. In New York, the temperature went down to 3 degrees yesterday, with wind chills making it feel closer to -14. In other parts of the Northeast, the feels-like temperatures went down to -40. Fortunately, forecasters say the temperature will increase every day this week and move into the 40s by Wednesday. Coming up, Japan's prime minister vows to deliver on her campaign pledges after her party's record election win, saying there's no time to bask in the afterglow of victory. Meanwhile, a top aide to UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigning amid backlash connected to related Epstein files. I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. More backlash from the Epstein files in the UK. Another member of Prime Minister Keir Starmer's team stepping down. His communications chief, Tim Allen, resigning, making the way for a new team. This follows the earlier resignation of Starmer's closest aide, Morgan McSweeney. McSweeney taking responsibility for pushing the appointment of Peter Mandelson, a former senior Labour politician. Mandelson is now at the center of the controversy. He's accused of, in the U.S. Justice Department files released last month, of releasing discussions on possible UK asset sales and tax changes to the late Jeffrey Epstein during the financial crash. Starmer addressed staff at Downing Street calling for unity. The Conservative opposition leader criticizing Starmer's leadership. Mandelson now under police investigation. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting Armenia and Azerbaijan this week. He'll push a Washington-brokered peace deal that could reshape energy and trade in the South Caucasus. He brings a 2-day visit to Armenia today. This trip comes 6 months after a White House agreement aimed at ending nearly 40 years of conflict. Vance is promoting the Trump route for international peace and prosperity. That's a 25-mile corridor linking Azerbaijan to its separate Western territory and Turkey. The corridor could connect Asia to Europe, bypass Russia and Iran, and give the West access to critical minerals. Analysts saying even small U.S. attention can make a big difference in the region. Vance meeting with the Armenian Prime Minister. They signing a joint statement on peaceful nuclear declaration between their two nations. Here's what he said about the benefit of the project for the local people.
The TRIP fund, what it will do is means that a lot of private capital is going to flow into building railroads, into building pipelines, and again, to building the interconnectedness that will create real prosperity for the region, but also allow the peace agreement to stick.
Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi vowed to deliver on her campaign pledges today after an election win over the weekend. She spoke in Tokyo after her party won a record majority.
We have no time to bask in the afterglow of victory. With the cooperation from the opposition parties, I will call for a special parliamentary session to pass the budget-related bills, including the next year's budget sooner rather than later.
Pledged to revise Japan's defense policies in favor of offensive military capabilities, vowing to lift a ban on weapons exports. The Japanese Prime Minister saying she aims to address the high cost of living by suspending a sales tax on food. Takaichi also pushing for tougher immigration policies as part of her platform. And the top commander of NATO in Europe says the alliance is planning for a possible Arctic mission. NATO is planning to strengthen security in the high north amid increasing Chinese and Russian activity.
Continued Russian presence and increasing Chinese presence that's there. I think it's been reported widely that we're doing some planning now on a new Arctic mission called Arctic Sentry. That has not kicked off yet, but we're in the final stages of planning for that enhanced vigilance activity.
The move comes as President Trump keeps highlighting the need to secure the Arctic, especially Greenland. Trump says a strong U.S. presence in Greenland is crucial to defend against threats from China and other adversaries. The president previously pointed to the fact that Washington protected Greenland during World War II, saying the U.S. should have kept its presence there rather than handing over control back to Denmark. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead a delegation of U.S. officials to the Munich Security Conference this coming weekend. The head of the annual gathering of security experts and policymakers shared the news today.
In my view, transatlantic relations are currently experiencing a significant crisis of confidence and credibility. That is why it is particularly gratifying that the American side is taking such a keen interest in Munich.
The conference chair also said he expects more than 50 U.S. members of Congress to attend, as well as the governors of Michigan and California. He also addressed last year's comments from Vice President J.D. Vance, who accused European leaders of censoring free speech. The chair said he expects Secretary Rubio to focus on U.S. foreign policy. President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to lead the Ukrainian delegation. Ukrainian people will be given a special award that is normally given to an individual. All right, coming up, a World War II Navy veteran celebrates his 100th birthday aboard the USS New Jersey. He recounts the moment the Japanese surrendered, ending the war. And German biathletes celebrate their team's third-place win at the Winter Olympics. An enthusiastic team member experiences a mishap with his bronze medal. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, there is so much going on, especially the Olympics news, but also Super Bowl. Let's start with the NFL. Seattle beat New England last night, 29-13. Did it play out like you expected? I know you made a prediction just before the weekend.
I did make a prediction. I was right. I did have Seattle winning.
So.
I thought it was going to be much, much closer. I mean, the game, I guess in some ways it did play out how I thought it would. Like, you know, Seattle's defense was very dominant, but they were probably even more dominant than I thought. Now, they were all over Patriots quarterback Drake May from the start. They finished with 6 sacks of May. That's one shy of the Super Bowl record. And really, for all intents and purposes, that last one, they got to him, they got the ball out of him and ran it for a touchdown. I mean, that was as good as a sack. It looked like a strip sack to me. That would have been 7. They counted that as an interception instead. I mean, but their pass rush was so fierce. It had an effect on May, even when the few times that he had actually time to throw the ball. I mean, he looked like he was sped up. Then when he did have the time, when he did have open receivers, he wasn't able to hit them. Now, some of that could be he had that shoulder injury heading into the Super Bowl, so that could be part of it too, but he did not have his best day there. Now, meanwhile, the Patriots, they couldn't run the ball either. So then when they fell behind by a couple of scores there, you know, in the second half, they were in big trouble because then all they had to do was, you know, the Seahawks know you're going to pass, and so they're going to be all over the pass rush there. So a very dominant win by Seattle. That is their second Super Bowl win in franchise history.
That's true, though, despite the dominant win, the game was actually pretty close.
Yeah, really, through first 3 quarters. I mean, it was 9-0 at halftime. It was 12-0 through 3 quarters. You know, the Patriots defense kept them in it. They did well on defense as well. Really, I would say Sam Darnold, his scrambling ability really kind of separated the game there early on there in the first half especially. They got a few field goals there early on. And Chris Collinsworth, who's one of the best commentators out there for NBC. I really like listening to him. He pointed that out. I thought he was spot on with that there in the first half. Then they got also the running back, Kenneth Walker. They got him going. He had a big first half, 94 yards rushing. That was a big difference in the game. He finished with 135. He was named Super Bowl MVP. But like you said, there was no touchdown until the fourth quarter. That is when Sam Darnold hit A.J. Barmer as a tight end to make it 19-0 then in the fourth quarter.
So exciting.
You know, the final score would have been a lot worse had it not been for Patriots cornerback Christian Gonzalez. He was credited with 3 pass deflections. There's one right there. Yep. That was a very crucial one. That would have been a huge gainer, and in a tight game, a huge gainer is a big deal. It seemed like he had more pass deflections. He was only credited with 3. Had they somehow pulled this off, he could have been easily named Super Bowl MVP. So even though they lost, there were a few bright spots though for the Patriots.
For sure.
And they've got Drake May coming back next year. He's only 23 years old, so the future is good for the Patriots.
Hopeful.
So yeah, I'm looking at hopeful
That's
here
all that
for
matters.
Patriots.
Right.
I mean,
Looking forward.
The Patriots fans had just had a huge dynasty. You know, 6 Super Bowl wins. This could soon be the start of a new one. It just wasn't this season. That's all.
Okay. Well, there's sure to be another one at some point. We shall see. But let's shift gears to the Olympics. The U.S. finally on the medals board with a pair of golds. Also very exciting, including a thrilling one in the team figure skating competition.
Yeah, we had the team figure skating competition taking place over the last 3 days. Now, everybody loves the figure skating in the Olympics. Now, the team skating competition, you have 8 events in all. Now, after 7 events, the U.S. and Japan were tied for first. So it all came down to the men's free skate competition. And the U.S. had Ilya Malinin skating for them. Now, he's a 2-time defending world champion.
There he is.
But this is his first first Olympics. Now, he kind of struggled in the short program. I should say struggled. He got second place, which is unheard of for him. Yesterday, though, he was back to his normal self doing in that free skate competition. 5 quadruple jumps, and look at that. He's doing the back flip right there at the end. I don't know how he does that. I've never seen anyone skating do that, but he landed it, his signature move. He got first place, so the U.S. edged out Japan to win gold. Now, yesterday, we also had a very frightening scene in the women's downhill. U.S. skier Lindsey Vonn crashed just maybe, 10 seconds into her routine there. She clipped the gate. I don't know, she fell head over feet there, broke a broken leg. They had to airlift her off of the course. Had surgery yesterday. She is in stable condition, but she had one of the great stories coming into these games. I mean, she was retired for 6 years, came back at age 40. So unfortunately for her, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's a kind of a win anyway, regardless of the kind of tragic end. I'm sure she's got something else. Her
getting to the Olympics was an amazing thing, but unfortunately it just did not end well for her here.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for the update, Dave. Looking forward to more.
Thank you.
Continuing with sports news, skier Lindsey Vonn's Olympic crash, which came while she was still recovering from an earlier accident, has ignited a debate over who decides when an injured competitor is fit to compete. Here's that.
Skier Lindsey Vonn's crash on Sunday's Olympic downhill is raising bigger questions about who decides when an injured competitor is fit to race. The 41-year-old American took the start line just a week after rupturing knee ligaments in a World Cup accident in the Swiss resort of Crans, Montana. She trained with a knee brace and posted the third fastest run on Saturday, but on race day she suffered a devastating fall and was airlifted to a hospital with a broken leg. Vonn had said she felt strong enough to compete after days of therapy and medical consultations. But some experts say skiing needs clearer protocols governing when a competitor can return to racing, perhaps modeled on rugby's rules for players with concussion. International Ski and Snowboard Federation representative Peter Girdal says injuries are part of the sport.
Well, I think it was a mistake of the racer, as most of the times happen. The course was maybe bumpy, or it was it's an Olympic medal race, so it has to be a challenging downhill, and most of the athletes managed really well. So if there are some mistakes from time to time, this happen in our sport, and unfortunately happened to Lindsey Vonn and to Cande Moreno. We have 2 athletes that unfortunately injured.
Girdal says return to play decisions currently fall on national federations, not the international ski body. Norway, for instance, barred its own injured skier, Marte Monsen, from starting on Sunday. Athletes themselves are split. Some defend personal choice, while others worry about the example it sets for younger competitors. Italian skiing legend Alberto Tomba says Vonn's drive to compete was understandable, but misguided.
She shouldn't have raced in Crans, Montana, as I said. After Tarvisio, the last podium, her last victory, she should have come here at the end of January and trained. But for an athlete, it's not easy to decide something like that. When you feel in good shape, you want to keep winning. One race leads to another.
And an enthusiastic German biathlete celebrating his team's third-place finish had his bronze medal break over the weekend. One of his teammates recounted the incident as they celebrated their achievement.
Yes, we did get together again as a whole team in the evening for a small celebration. We were also allowed to do an entrance into the hotel again. Justus Strelo immediately took advantage of this to jump and dance again. Unfortunately, the medal broke at that moment. But I hope and I believe that not much was missing and that it can be put back together relatively quickly. So, yes, there was a little damage, but I think it will all be fixable.
Germany taking third place in the mixed relay biathlon at the 2026 Winter Olympics in Italy. France winning the event, with Italy coming in second. During celebrations following the event, the medal of one of the German biathletes broke. Several other athletes reporting that their medals had come off from the bands. So far, Germany winning 3 medals at the Winter Olympics, a gold medal in luge, a silver medal in alpine skiing, and 1 bronze medal in biathlon. Meanwhile, the Super Bowl wasn't the only big game yesterday. A few hours before, more than 150 puppies gathered to take part in the Puppy Bowl.
Puppy Bowl 22 is back underway. Fluff's Apple and Ruff's Clementine battle for possession of the toy.
Apple and Clementine. Maybe we should call this the Fruit Bowl?
Just wait until Fluff's Strawberry is on the field. And it's Apple who gains possession of the toy. Case of sibling rivalry, Taylor.
Speaking of Fluff Summer are sisters, but there's definitely a...
Team Ruff and Team Fluff went back and forth in the match, but in the end, Team Fluff won their second consecutive championship, taking home the Lombardi Trophy. The final score was Team Fluff 73 and Team Ruff 69. Boba from Team Fluff earned the MVP award, Most Valuable Puppy. The Puppy Bowl helps raise awareness for animal shelters and rescue groups across the country. A World War II Navy veteran celebrated his 100th birthday last week aboard the USS New Jersey. Since the war, he's been a longtime volunteer at what is now a museum. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on a sailor who served on the nation's most decorated battleship.
Happy birthday, dear Johnny.
Last week, family and friends sang happy birthday to lifelong New Jersey resident John Johnny Q. Quinesso Sr. Now 100 years old, the former Navy radio man served in the South Pacific during World War II. Since then, he has spent more than 2 decades volunteering at the Battleship New Jersey Museum.
I call the Battleship New Jersey my second home. I've been a tour guide for over 20 years on the battleship, and it was one of the most wonderful things I've ever done in my life.
Quinesso's service took him to Guam, Okinawa, and Saipan during some of the war's fiercest fighting. The U.S. was preparing for a potential invasion of Japan when Quinesso received a transmission. The Japanese had surrendered. The war was over. He recounted the moment he ran to tell his captain.
He hollers, "It better damn well be important, you just woke me up." I said, "Well, read this message." You'll see. Well, he read the message. All hell broke loose. I'm a 19-year-old kid, and I've seen grown men cry, hugging each other. The war was over. That was my most glorious moment.
Quinesso's presence on the ship helps educate the next generation about the war and what it means to be an American sailor. Last week, Quinesso received New Jersey's Distinguished Service Medal, the state's highest military award. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Happy birthday.
That's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox. Thanks for watching.